Prince William just executed what will undoubtedly be recorded as the most ruthless, cold-blooded, and brilliantly calculated power grab the British monarchy has witnessed in the last 300 years. This was not a tabloid rumor or a petty family disagreement over a dinner seating chart. This was a catastrophic, earth-shattering counter-coup. It was the absolute, total destruction of Queen Camilla's deepest, darkest ambitions, orchestrated with a terrifying, surgical precision that left her entirely powerless. He weaponized a forgotten, dusty law from the year 1772, turning a desperate power play into a psychological thriller that played out in real time right inside the ancient echoing walls of Windsor Castle. Make absolutely no mistake, this was a lethal constitutional strike that has permanently and violently redrawn the entire power structure of the House of Windsor overnight. Before we step into the shadows and dissect every single shocking detail of this unparalleled royal takedown, I respectfully ask you to subscribe to Uncovering the raw, unfiltered truth behind those heavy velvet ropes requires dedication. And if you value honest reporting that refuses to back down, hitting that subscribe button ensures you will never miss a single crucial update on this monumental shift in royal history. Thank you for being part of this journey. To truly comprehend the sheer, horrifying magnitude of this betrayal, you have to mentally place yourself in the deeply disturbing context of the moment. For months, King Charles has been quietly fighting severe, agonizing health issues. Behind the glittering public facade of the monarchy, the reality is far darker. According to multiple highly placed sources, the king has spent significant amounts of time in almost total isolation. He has been heavily medicated, physically exhausted, and existing in an incredibly vulnerable, fragile state within his private quarters at Clarence House. The vibrant, active monarch the public sees on television was, in these private moments, a profoundly weakened man simply trying to survive his treatments. It was during one of these extraordinarily dark, fragile periods, when the king was slipping in and out of a heavily medicated fog, barely in control of his own physical faculties, that Queen Camilla allegedly decided to make her ultimate, terrifying move. She did not approach her husband's bedside to offer comfort, to hold his hand, or to ease his suffering. She arrived armed. She carried a formal, legally binding, meticulously drafted document, heavily bound in deep red leather. This was a dossier that contained a demand so absolute and so historically dangerous that it defies belief. She wanted her children from her previous marriage, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, along with her grandchildren, to be officially, permanently elevated into the ranks of the British nobility. We are not talking about polite honorary titles. We are talking about guaranteed, irrevocable spots at every sacred ceremonial event, formal royal styling, and the absolute right to be addressed with the reverence and honors strictly, historically reserved for those born of royal blood. This was a blatant, calculated, and breathtakingly arrogant attempt to forcefully graft her own entirely separate bloodline onto the ancient, thousand-year-old institution of the British monarchy. She wanted to make the Parker Bowles name an unshakable, permanent fixture in the future of the crown. If this had been a legitimate constitutional request, there is a rigid, unbreakable process that must be followed. Constitutional lawyers must be summoned. Privy councillors must heavily debate the historical ramifications. The Prime Minister must be informed, and most importantly, the direct heir to the throne must be intimately involved in the discussion. Camilla deliberately bypassed every single one of those constitutional safeguards. She bypassed the government, she bypassed the advisors, and she went straight into the dimly lit, silent bedroom of an incapacitated, heavily medicated man. The most deeply horrifying, genuinely chilling detail of this entire saga is the description of exactly how she allegedly obtained his signature on that red leather dossier. Sources with intimate knowledge of the event claim that she did not simply ask the king to sign it. She knew he was not fully present. Instead, she allegedly reached down, physically took his trembling, weakened hand, wrapped his frail fingers tightly around a heavy pen, and forcefully guided his hand across the crisp parchment to produce a jagged, shaky, barely legible scrawl. If this account is true, we have left the realm of palace intrigue entirely. This is the profound exploitation of a deeply vulnerable human being who was completely incapable of giving informed consent. This was not the act of a loving spouse. This was a hostile, predatory political takeover, executed in a moment of extreme, agonizing vulnerability. Intoxicated by her supposed victory, Camilla made a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. Just 48 hours after forcibly securing that jagged signature, she gathered her son, her daughter, and her grandchildren, and paraded them through the most restricted, hallowed, and heavily guarded halls of Windsor Castle on what can only be described as a sickening victory tour. They did not stay in the public galleries. They walked directly through locked, heavily secured corridors. They strolled past priceless, irreplaceable historical artifacts and marched straight into the ancient robing room where centuries of sacred coronation robes are kept under heavy guard. Terrified witnesses watched in absolute paralyzed horror as Tom Parker Bowles casually sat himself down in sacred ceremonial chairs that are reserved exclusively for princes of the blood. Her grandchildren were seen carelessly pulling at antique velvet curtains and touching the marble busts of former legendary kings. Camilla stood there, watching this desecration with a smug, deeply satisfied smirk on her face. This was not a family outing. This was a psychological occupation. She was deliberately trying to normalize their physical presence in these sacred spaces, attempting to make their royal inclusion feel like an absolute, inevitable reality before anyone even had the chance to challenge the secret document burning a hole in her red leather bag. What Camilla fundamentally failed to realize, blinded by her own insatiable ambition, was that she was being watched. Prince William was standing perfectly still in the dark shadows of a second-floor viewing corridor. He witnessed every single second of this arrogant display. And this exact moment is where the story shifts from a tragic family betrayal into a masterclass of absolute, terrifying royal vengeance. Any normal person watching his father's legacy be mocked and manipulated would have stormed down that grand staircase screaming in uncontrollable fury. They would have caused a massive public scene, demanding answers and throwing the intruders out by force. But William is not an ordinary man. He is a fiercely protective son, but he is also the future King of England. His mind operates with the cold, strategic calculation of a military general. William instantly understood that an emotional, screaming outburst was exactly what Camilla wanted. It would have allowed her to run straight back to the king's bedside in tears, playing the tragic victim, using Charles's deep affection for her as an impenetrable shield. A loud argument would have been a massive tactical error. So, instead of reacting, William did the one thing she could never possibly counter. He stayed in the absolute silence of the shadows. His face remained completely calm, completely unreadable. He turned away from the balcony, knowing he had just witnessed the enemy's entire battle plan, and he walked into the darkness to build a deadlier one. William knew he could not execute this counterstrike alone. He needed an ally who possessed the exact same unwavering, terrifying dedication to the crown that he did. He bypassed every advisor and went straight to his aunt, Princess Anne, the late Queen Elizabeth's famously stoic, entirely uncompromising daughter, has always served as the iron conscience of the royal family. She was raised in a generation that put duty before breath. They convened a midnight war council deep within the sprawling, underground, climate-controlled archives beneath the castle. They were not gathering to vent their personal frustrations. They were hunting for a weapon. Deep within those ancient, dusty parliamentary records, they found something absolutely devastating. The Royal Marriages Act of 1772. William and Anne had no intention of taking this to a public court of law where the media could feast on the details. They operate within the closed, terrifying internal universe of the royal household, where ancient precedent, centuries of custom, and the sheer, unstoppable force of the heir apparent's will carries a weight that can crush any strict legal interpretation. They had their constitutional weapon loaded, and now they were going to execute a flawless, silent assassination of Camilla's dreams. What unfolded over the next few days was a palace-wide security operation executed with a level of military precision that reportedly left even highly seasoned palace staff completely terrified. William and Anne initiated a total, suffocating lockdown. They deployed elite, heavily decorated guards from the Welsh Regiment, a military unit possessing intense, unshakable personal loyalty only to the Prince of Wales. Queen Camilla was immediately placed under a quiet but absolutely comprehensive, invisible net of surveillance. Every single step she took was monitored. Every individual who dared to cross the threshold of her private chambers was logged and background checked. The ultimate trap was meticulously set to snap shut over the distribution of gala passes for an upcoming, highly exclusive, globally broadcast international royal ceremony. These passes are heavy, gold-plated metal credentials embedded with unique encrypted security codes, granting physical entry to the most exclusive, heavily guarded room on the face of the earth. Possessing one means you are officially, undeniably recognized as part of the supreme inner circle. Camilla, overflowing with blinding arrogance, had confidently submitted a final guest list. Right at the top were the names of her children and her grandchildren. She was so entirely convinced that her red leather dossier made her completely untouchable that she was already preparing for the grand debut of the new extended Parker Bowles royal dynasty. She had fatally underestimated the cold-blooded nature of the man who would one day be king. When that arrogant request for passes finally came across the desk, Princess Anne was sitting right there waiting for it. With the heavy, ancient 1772 law book resting ominously on the table beside her, an icy, furious Princess Anne personally intercepted the document. With slow, deliberate movements, she took every single gold-plated pass that bore the names Parker Bowles or Lopes, and she physically destroyed them. She ripped the secondary paperwork to shreds, locked the destroyed credentials in a heavy iron security box, and issued a direct, terrifying command to the palace staff. The guest list was to be brutally and immediately purged. Anyone who did not possess direct royal blood was entirely erased. The door was slammed completely shut. A terrifying new era has officially begun. And under this ascendant, uncompromising new power, the heavy iron gates of the palace have slammed permanently and unforgivingly shut